I know you're going to be blown away by this, but we're going to have to talk about free speech today. It would be nice if a week would pass when there wasn't some sort of threat to freedom of speech, but it seems that almost every day there's a new outrage on the horizon aimed at chipping away our right to free expression. There are three specific happenings right now that I want to focus on in no particular order. First, there's the ongoing saga of Bret Weinstein at Evergreen University in Washington. In case you missed our live stream with Bret last week, he's being attacked by being called a racist and a bigot for opposing a day in which white students wouldn't be welcome on campus. Bret claimed that the revised day of absence on campus based on racial segregation was not just racist and bigoted, but was the complete reverse of what the day was supposed to stand for. Bret has been a progressive and a far lefty his whole life, but even he is not immune to the toxic ideology of leftism, which rates victimhood as virtue and will swallow anyone who dares deviate from its authoritarian rule. The campus was closed for a couple of days due to threats of violence, and even now, Bret is getting no backing from the administration, which appears to be bending to the demands of the crazed mob. Even worse, mainstream media is basically all but ignoring this story because it so shatters the regressive ideology. Mainstream left-leaning outlets don't want to touch this story because they don't want to be tarred the same way Bret has been. Thus, almost all the coverage of the Evergreen story has been from right-leaning websites. Bret has done 3 live interviews that I know of, one right here, one on Joe Rogan's podcast, and one with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. He hasn't been invited on CNN or MSNBC or NPR, and none of those outlets have even written a piece on the story. When you hear that trust in mainstream media is at an all-time low, it's reasons like ignoring hugely relevant stories that go against their narrative that are part of the reason. The next story of the last few days was the outrage over Kathy Griffin's ISIS-inspired photos holding up President Trump's decapitated bloody head. First off, on the free speech front, I fully support Kathy's right to take these pictures and make art as she sees fit. I don't think that these photos are a direct call to violence, which would be a crime, and the pictures should be seen through the lens that she's a comedian and a provocateur, regardless of whether you think that the images are in poor taste or just outright awful. So while it is 100% in her right to make the images, it's also 100% in CNN's right as her employer to fire her if they see fit. Now, interestingly, in this case, it was the right calling for CNN to fire Griffin, and it was the left that was defending her, although they were doing it a bit less than usual. While this is a flip on the script of the last few years, it's important to remember it seems people only hold their values when it's easy to do so. Just imagine if it had been a conservative comedian like Tim Allen holding up a severed head of President Obama. The left would have been demanding his show be canceled, and the right would have been defending him. Ironically, Tim Allen's highly rated show was canceled a couple weeks ago, and many people think that it is at least partially because he's been an outspoken conservative in Hollywood. The final story I want to touch on is the outrage over Bill Maher using the N-word on Real Time last Friday. I can't even repeat what Bill Maher said because even just by quoting him, I'll end up in hot water, which shows you just how insane the language police have gotten. Basically, he made a joke using the N-word and all hell broke loose. To be clear, he didn't use the N-word to describe anyone in particular or take a racist position. It was a line that I suspect was pre-packaged to elicit a reaction from the crowd. It not only did elicit a reaction from the live studio audience, but also the bigoteer brigade, which immediately began calling for his firing from HBO. I even saw comedians that I know calling for him to be fired over a joke. This is Bill Maher, who many of you who lean right absolutely hate, and now the left is doing your job of trying to destroy him. Sadly, the left has been coming for Bill for a long time, mainly because he isn't afraid of talking about radical Islam, which has set him apart from most on the left. I know a little something about that myself. HBO took the joke out of repeats of the program and so far has withstood calls to fire him, and Maher even apologized, something he's chastised others for doing in the past. Senator Al Franken canceled an appearance on Real Time for this week, despite being a friend of Bill and of the show for many years. I've invited Senator Franken on the show to discuss, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So there you have it. A professor bullied off campus by threats of violence for fighting against racism. A comedian fired for a tasteless gag, and another comic under the threat of firing for a joke. None of these are threats to the First Amendment, which of course, as you know, is the government coming for your speech, but they all add up to the chill factor around freedom of expression that I've been talking about for quite some time. If you were a professor, would you be willing to explore a controversial idea with students after what's happened to Bret? If you were an artist, would you be willing to paint a controversial painting after what's happened to Kathy? And if you were a comic, would you be willing to tell an offensive joke after what's happening to Bill? If you answered no to any of those, then you must acknowledge that the threat to free expression is real. Don't like Bret? Don't take his class. Think Kathy is crass? Watch something else on New Year's. Don't think Bill is funny? Change the channel. But whatever you do, keep watching the Rubin Report, because we've got Jason Whitlock from Fox Sports 1 on the show this week. He was in his own outrage-a-palooza last week with, of course, calls for him to be fired too, but I'll save that for our chat.